Hotep. This is your brother Beniti Amon Ray. Thought I'd do a topic today on getting in tune with nature, getting in tune with the elements, being able to understand and understand and overstand the Creator. But we can't do that without being in tune with nature. This is an aspect of our doctrine that we don't focus enough on and connect. What does it mean to be being in tune with nature? Well, I'm gonna show you something. I'm out here in Wellerby Park in Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. Here we are in the middle of February, and our friends in the Northeast are under ice and snow, literally. That's the beauty of being here. I know my family, me being born and raised in New York and living in the cold most of my life, can appreciate a day like this in the middle of February. And here we are, I want to say mid 70s is the temperature. Beautiful sunny day. But I'm gonna glance the phone camera around so you can see. I want you to pay attention to the elements, the water, the sunshine, the trees, the wind. We have all the elements in nature working in unison with each other. You got Geb the earth, you got Nut is blue, the sky is blue as can be right now, Ra is shining. Shu is just providing just enough of its cooling force for the wind. You have Satuk providing that heat when combining the elements. In understanding nature and creation, if we're not moving in conjunction with it, then we become disconnected. Now, what tends to happen to most of us is, first of all, we migrate to climates that are against our natural habitat. Let me give you an example. Most of us, people, Nubian, people of color, blacks, Latinos, Asians, the entire Nubian family, when we come to this country, or we leave places like the Caribbean or warm climate places, we tend to go to probably the worst places for our DNA. We go to places like Canada. We go to places like England. We go to places like New York, Boston, DC, Philly, all the cold places in the Northeast, which actually disconnects us from nature and our ancestors. Let's start with the sun, for an example. We start with the sun, okay? When we start with the sun, we have to receive a certain amount of sunlight in order to keep us spiritually balanced. I don't know if you're aware of that. Some people might be aware of it on a certain level, but it can be very damaging to us spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, and especially for our neuromelanin when we're not receiving enough of sunlight. Now, the state of Florida, for an example, being one of those tropical warm climate environments, I'll use that because this is where I reside right now, gets over 300 days of sunshine a year. Okay, 300 days of sunshine of the year, and that's well over 75 to 80% of the year the sun is shining here. That is critical. The problem with us in our spiritual evolution and in our spiritual journey, okay, we don't want to take care of the physical aspect of things. We have to start there. You can't bypass the physical and just jump right onto the spiritual and think you're going to be some guru or some mystic without taking the proper steps. It starts with the physical in order for you to master the spiritual. Nature is very critical. So, for an example, this park here, I come out here 4 to 5 days a week just to absorb the sunshine and just to exercise. They have an exercise trail here, a walking trail. And again, I'm going to flip the camera around just so you can see. And there's an abundance of natural photosynthesis going on through the trees and the greenery. Look at the trees and the greenery. Got palm trees, different types of greenery going on out here, and I'm going to tell you, that's that greenery and that healing vegetation that we need to breathe in, the oxygen that some of these trees give off, that photosynthesis process, that regenerates our spirit too. This is very critical. So my point I'm trying to make is we don't get out enough into nature and the sun, and this is disconnecting us spiritually. We have to be exposed to the sun for certain amounts of time, not just for the natural vitamin D that it provides, not just for the natural recharge and rebirth it does to your neural and your neuromelanin, but it keeps the mind mentally balanced. It keeps the alpha brain waves focusing and sending out that correct energy and receiving that correct energy. And it opens up the chakras or the receptors to receive that energy. Because remember, if the chakras are blocked, you can't receive any of this energy. So it starts with nature. So when we make statements and say, we have to get in tune with nature, we don't want to just make a blank statement. What does that mean? Exercise. We don't want to address this. Not like it should be addressed. Diet has a critical role in this. And again, we'll do a whole piece on that because that's going to vary the blood type. So I don't want to get too much into the diet right now. But meditation, correct breathing. There's many different Egyptian breathing exercises that our ancestors have left for us through our elders. Proper breathing is key. One great thing to do is to come out here in nature and practice your proper breathing techniques to, again, connect with nature, absorb the elements, because when you do that, you're exposing yourself to your ancestors right now in this environment, in this setting. And this has a lot to do why some people are imbalanced and others aren't. Now, again, I want to focus on, it is what it is if you do live in cold climates, but I want to address that for a fact. Now, I'm telling you this from a perspective of somebody that grew up pretty much my entire life, born and raised in New York, and going through those cold winters, cold weathers. Now we have to realize with the pole shift in 2012, it has had an effect on the weather. And what we're seeing now over the last several years, and it's going to continue on, you're going to see more brutal and severe colder winters in the Northeast and longer and hot days down here in the South because of the pole shift. Now, if we are where we're supposed to be and in tune with nature and the sun and the elements, we're going to be protected, okay? Because when you go into the so-called Bible, one of the main quotes they mistranslate millions of times, whether you're talking to religious people or not, is the book of Malachi, chapter 4, verse 2. When it says the Son of Righteousness is coming with healing in its wings, it's talking about end times. When you read the whole 4th chapter of Malachi, the word translated there is Shemesh. It's S-U-N, Son in English, not the S-O-N, Son, the Son of God, or who they falsely refer to Jesus. It's talking about that Son right up there. Not sure if the camera's going to blank that out, but that Son right there is our Savior and our salvation. We work in conjunction with nature. It tells you that this Son in these end days and times would come with healing in its wings. They would talk about this Son coming and emitting fire and destruction. And when it's speaking of the fire and destruction, it's not, I don't want to speak in a cataclysmic doomsday sense, because that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about the direct rays of the sun penetrating the surface when you go back and read the text closely. And it's talking about in this day and time when our ozone layer, which has now begun to deplete, only those individuals who are conducive to the sun will be able to survive. Now, I want to stress this. Don't go by just because you're dark skinned that you think you're going to survive the heat that this sun is emitting if you haven't programmed, or I should say reprogrammed, your neuromelanin, because we're going to have a lot of our dark-skinned brothers and sisters who have not spiritually connected themselves physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually with nature. They're going to fall to the wayside too, because they're not going to be able to take the transition. Don't go, again, like I said, by the physical appearance, because that varies in so many different degrees. And it kind of makes me laugh when I see down here sometimes you see Nubians or black people walking around with umbrellas to prevent the sun from beaming directly down on them, which I find that very humorous, because if you were a dark-skinned African, you were born on the beach. So the sun shouldn't bother you. It should regenerate you. But when you're now adverse to the sun and you're fighting it, there's something not right in your neuromelanin that you need to address because you're disconnected from nature. Then you take mixed individuals, or people such as myself, very fair-skinned individuals who have Nubian blood. Some of those individuals who have tuned themselves in spiritually have linked themselves in where there's a direct connection with it where it has no effect, or I should say a negative effect. Now, granted, I'm not saying sit out in the sun for hours, because eventually, regardless of how dark skinned or light you are, the sun will kick you in the ass and it will drain you. So by all means, I don't want not to be misinterpreted what I'm saying, but what I am saying is we need to be out here on a regular, in a consistent basis, getting in tune with nature. That's what it means. We can't get in tune with nature if we are not in in conjunction with and merging with the elements, the water, again, the trees, the sun. These are all of the elements that our ancestors tie into. And we have to get in tune with this. We can only get in tune with this in certain environments. Now, it's hard to do this when you live, per se, up in the Northeast in cold climates. Not only does it affect you spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, it also alters your diet. Now, let me say this. If you do live or were from the Caribbean and migrated to some of these colder climates, there's one thing that should never happen to you. You should never become diabetic. And I'm going to tell you why. A lot of people that leave the Caribbean and come to the United States and become diabetic, because when you live in the Caribbean, be it Jamaica, Trinidad, Puerto Rico, St. Croix, Jamaica, wherever, when you live in the Caribbean, for the most part, when you intook sugar, you intook natural sweeteners, brown sugar, sugar cane, natural sweeteners that were grown from the earth that didn't have all the bleaching flour ingredients or the white bleaching ingredients that was conducive to your DNA. So when you left your natural habitat, for an example, I'm using the sugar, and then you started ingesting all the artificial sugars, your DNA actually worked against you. You started to become sick. You developed high blood pressure, high cholesterol, congestive heart failure. The list goes on, because we know excess sugars, when they're intaken, they're converted into carbohydrates and fat, and we have to be conscious of that. And again, we're going to do a piece on diet to kind of break that down a little bit more, so I don't want to get too much into that. But the point I'm trying to stress for the moment right now is when you leave your natural habitat in nature, which is in a tropical environment, be it Africa or the Caribbean, places in the Middle East, which are pretty much for the most part Northeast Africa, tropical environments, and you migrate into cold environments, you're going against naturally what you are by nature and blood. So it's hard to make that spiritual link. And I always get the question, what steps can one take? What can one do? When does one start to see the transition of making that spiritual transformation? Okay, look at this. We got a little duck. Animals around here too. Point that out. Another important thing that we need to be interact with and share our energy with, because they are a representation of nature and creation. Now remember, understanding the creator and aligning with nature, you have to recognize the energy or the stamp of creation or the creator in everything, in the elements, in the creation of physical human beings. This is all interconnected, and you cannot appreciate that until you meditate and reflect on that connection. Now, this is also another great thing to do, is to come to a place like this, to sit down and meditate, or even do contemplative meditation. I know you heard me talk about this in some of my classes and my lectures and some of my YouTube posts. But a great thing to do is when you're walking this trail, something I do is I put on what they call hemisync music, which are different sound waves, brainwave frequency, meditative sounds, music, nature sounds. And I will walk with that playing and do what they call contemplative meditation, or find a serene place here in nature and just sit down and meditate. And you will feel the presence of your ancestors in a place like this, because this is where you find them. If you want to find God, you find God everywhere in nature, not in some church, not in some masjid, and not in some temple looking up to the sky trying to incite spook or spirit forces that don't exist. This is where you find the creator. If you claim that you deal with spiritual consciousness, if you claim that you worship and acknowledge your ancestors, well, this is where you go to make that spiritual connection with them. And it starts on the physical level first. And it's so important to be in environments that are conducive to your spirituality and your growth. So it's hard. You're only going to grow to a certain level when you're in environments that just may not be conducive to who and what you are by nature. So coming out here, exercising on a regular basis, and getting enough of sunshine is critical. Let's talk about the alpha brainwaves, for an example. Now, I've mentioned this several times. This is key and this is critical, because when the alpha brainwaves are not functioning at its full capacity, this also is a block or a blockage. It keeps the chakras shut down, and the central nervous system cannot receive the impulses or the messages that the cosmic consciousness or the universe is sending out. I mentioned before, there's supplements you can take to assist you in that process, because remember, the body is constantly stripped of its natural bacteria on a regular basis, especially if you're on medication or antibiotics. Your body is stripped of a lot of natural bacteria. Now, they'll tell you, for an example, to take one of these probiotics that I'm about to explain to you called acidophilus, because they say when you come off of, for an example, antibiotics, it's good to take a high intake of cultural bacteria called acidophilus, because it replenishes the natural bacteria that the medications stripped the body of. Now, it's very important to do this, and I'm saying if you ever need medical attention, by all means, take that medical attention. But there's preventive measures you can take to balance out. Now, I don't want to get spooky, because you have some people that don't understand the medical aspect of it, and they'll try to go 100% natural, but they don't know the science of repairing the problem to get it to a restorative state where you can finish the healing process. That's the key. So I want to stress this if you're listening. Don't be foolish if you do need medical attention. Take the medical attention you need, but there's ways you can balance that out. So if you're on a lot of these medications, we should, on a daily basis, even if you're not on these medications, you should be taking probiotics on a regular basis. And this is many different, or billions and billions of cells in natural form of bacteria, that the best kind to get is in the herbal or vitamin stores, the ones that are refrigerated. Don't get the ones that are not refrigerated, they're not as potent. And they should have at least 5 to 6 billion cells of bacteria. And you can find a 1 or a 2 a day formula. This is important for us to intake on a daily basis, because this will actually get the body operating on its full capacity, especially the alpha brain waves. And I also mentioned one thing in the past, the omega-3 fish acids. That's very important for us to take on a daily basis. That also helps with proper brainwave functions. And if at least 1,200 milligram capsules, you can get the gelatin. Some like to take it in the liquid form. You can do that, but 1,200 milligrams of the natural omega-3s. These are excellent supplements. That, in conducive with coming down here on a regular basis, being in tune with nature, being exposed to the water, the elements, okay? Being exposed to the greenery, the trees, very important. And the ecological system of our planet, and these demons know they're throwing it off by destroying a lot of the natural elements that exist in nature, especially the trees. When you look at the country of Haiti right now, Haiti has almost 10% only left of greenery in their entire country. And that's creating a bunch of disease, because whether you know it or not or accept it, these trees are protecting us on a level that we can't see, that people are completely unaware of. And this is how we always operated for thousands upon thousands of years. Our ancient ancestors were always in tune with nature. We've become so disconnected with nature now. We've been destroying this planet. We've been tearing down things that are unnecessary. We've been polluting the environment. And this is why the changes that are coming and are happening on a regular basis, I don't want to say coming, because they are here and they are happening. We as gods and deities have to take responsibility for that. And Mother Nature knows that. And now Mother Nature is retaliating back through various different cataclysmic events, because we're throwing off the eco balance of the planet. We're throwing that off by all the destruction we emit to it. Because remember, the earth is a living entity. And it's just like you and me. If you and me get sick and we get a cold or we get a flu and we get a mucus buildup, eventually we have to rid ourselves of that bacteria or infection. Well, Mother Earth is doing the same thing right now. It's getting rid of certain individuals and things that are imbalancing the planet. And regardless of what you believe, when Mother Nature starts working, you better get out of the way. It doesn't matter what your so-called belief is, or what you think the creator is, or what you think life is about. Nature dictates what's going to happen to you, me, and the planet. That's the bottom line. You can't get away from that. Okay? Now, this has always been our way. For thousands upon thousands of years, we've always been a nature people. We've always been able to change, even our Native American ancestors. All these lands that we live in here in the so-called United States, especially down here in the South when dealing with the Seminole, the Washita, the Creek, all these different tribes, this was their land. They lived off of this land. They were in tune with nature naturally, okay? This was how we were always able to survive, by living off of the land, by living in conjunction with nature. We become so disconnected now that we're so dependent on artificial things. We're so dependent on technology that it's destroyed our creativity. Because think about this for a minute. Before you had cell phones, before you had laptops, before you had all flat screen TVs, we survived, and we'll survive again. You understand? We've become so dependent on this technology that now we've convinced ourselves we can't survive without it. As long as we have that sun that shined every day, and believe me, if that sun doesn't shine, that life-giving force, Ra, who we call in ancient Egypt, if that sun ceases to exist or shine, we're all gone. We're all dead. If that sun doesn't come up for more than 24 hours, this planet goes into a deep freeze. That's the reality of nature and creation. And no holy book, no monotheistic God of any Bible or Quran can dispute that fact, okay? And don't get spooked and say, well, God, your spook God controls that, when you can't even prove that your God exists. That's a whole nother story, okay? So we were always a nature people. We always worked with nature. We've got to get back on a certain level. Now, I'm not saying in an unrealistic way to become a space cadet or a space astronaut and go to the extreme. But I am saying to you, do what Ma'at initiates, is balancement. We have to be able to live in this world, but not be of this world. Meaning, do what we need to do to get what we need done, but we need not become completely submerged in this world where we disconnect ourselves from nature and creation. That's the point. So balance it out by getting out here and connecting with your ancestors. It's the way we've always lived for thousands upon thousands of years. And you will see the growth. So individuals that ask the question, brother, when am I going to see that change? I can't tell you when that change is going to come, brother or sister. Only you will know when that change comes, and you'll be able to confirm it for self. Nobody can walk up to you and say, yeah, brother, you just made, or yes, sister, you just made a spiritual evolution or a huge leap in your DNA. Nobody can confirm that for you. You'll know the change. You'll feel it. You'll see it. And when you start lining yourself up with nature and creation by doing these little basic steps that I'm explaining to you that are so important or critical, trying to go to, for lack of a better word, that next level, if you want to call it, you will start to see the results. You'll hear the inner voice of your ancestors speaking to you through meditation. The spirit will naturally guide you to where you need to be. Ritual, which I want to get into in another time. There's certain rituals that have to be done on a regular basis because rituals transform the DNA. That's why we did rituals in our mystery systems, going back to ancient Egypt or going back to the Yoruba of Nigeria when dealing with the Orishi. We did rituals because rituals was what transformed the DNA and linked us in. We'll talk about that. All this is connected. You have to put this balancement into place to kind of see the results that you are achieving, or we're all achieving, trying to attain. And again, I want to stress, this is a never-ending process. You're constantly learning, you're constantly growing, so you're never going to wake up and say, oh, wow, I'm a master now, I know everything. That's not how this works. This is a constant learning process on a daily basis. Every day you get up and learn. And when you're not striving to learn, or you're not inquisitive and asking questions, then you are creatively dead. Your DNA explosion has stopped at that point. That's where your connection is cut off. And unfortunately for our religious brothers and sisters, their spiritual DNA is at a standstill and not moving because they've been doing the same old crap for years upon years and nothing has changed. They're being told every year that Jesus is coming back for them. They've been told the same biblical stories week in and week out. They go every year by the same liturgical religious calendar, reenacting the same events. And like I said, everybody in the Bible is dead. The Bible is a book of dead people. Everybody in that book is dead. This right here is the book of life. Okay? Every day you get out of your bed, you write a chapter in the book of life. You create another page in the book of our ancestors by rising every day and acknowledging the sun, acknowledging nature and creation, acknowledging the elements, giving thanks and sustenance for that and for life. Every day you do that, and you come out here and you teach the truth and educate our people, we write a new chapter in the book of life, not the book of the dead. And that's the problem. The Bible, everybody in that book is dead. And the problem is we as ignorant people are still, and I'm not saying us per se who label ourselves as spiritually conscious, but we are still, our people are still in the ignorance mode of debating, fussing and fighting over a book of dead people that they can't even prove or confirm that existed were ever real. That's the sad part about it. We want to argue about what Abraham did, what Moses did, what Jesus did. I don't want to talk to you because I'm Seventh-day Adventist. My way is right. I'm a Baptist. I'm a Jehovah's Witness. It's going to be a long ass line in heaven. I'm going to tell you that right now, because I don't know where people are going to line up. Because the funny thing is, they all have these titles that they give their man-made religions, but yet you can't find not one of them in the Bible. Jesus never referred to himself as any of those things. These are titles that human beings and men created and distorted the original teachings of the master, who we call Yeshua or Jesus. They know nothing about the real Jesus. They know nothing about what he represented, what he actually came and taught, and what his real message was. And I'm going to do a whole class on that. Who was the real Jesus? Not no bullshit, not no getting in no religious debate. When you go back to the Essenes and the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, you'll find out who the real Yeshua was. And we'll explain to you how he got his name and what initiation he went through to receive his sacred name. And we all have a sacred name, and we're all on the path to receive it. And that sacred name is a tone. It's not a physical name. We'll get into that a whole nother time. But this is the ignorance that we got to come out of and get in tune with this nature, creation, and stop fighting over a book of dead people that you can't confirm existed. And when you come here in America, which is really sad, and one thing I find very sad, when you look at the Nubian American, or what we call the African American in this country has every other person's religion and culture but their own. Let me say that again. The African American in America has, for the most part, everybody else's culture but their own. Okay? If you go to China, or the Chinese, they deal with Buddhism or Confucians. Okay? You go to India, they deal with Brahma, Vishnu, and the Hindu deities. Correct? You go to what we call the Middle East, they have their modern day Arab religion called Islam. You identify with Arabs and their deity, their false deity, Allah. Then you go amongst the fake Jews in Israel. They have their own culture. Now, when I say African American, what technically is the African American's culture? I know I can hear a lot of pins dropping right now and a lot of crickets chirping. You know why? There is not one you can identify with in America, because they gave you every culture they wanted you to identify with. They gave you all these different sects of Christianity: Jehovah's Witness, Pentecostal, Baptist, Catholic, Protestant, Pentecostal, etc. They gave you all these cultures. Then you have our people bathed in the ignorance of different sects of Islam: Sunni Islam, Nation of Islam, Wahhabi sect Islam. The list goes on and on and on. 5% Nation. Okay? Our brothers are lost in Masonry, thinking they're going to get some great secret from the European, when the European stole that information from you and gave it to